Hello and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. As you can see in the description, we have an author guest today, Brad Giles, and we're super excited to talk to you. But we always like to start, Brad, with how's your week been so far?
My week has been good. My work, it gets busier and quieter at different points of the year because we do a lot of quarterly planning with teams. And so I'm currently in an ebb and not a flow, if that makes sense. So
Yes.
on with the release of the book, I've pretty much been working 7 days a week, doing all of the stuff that needs to be done since July. So I had a couple of hours to go for a walk with my wife, which was really, really rewarding through the bush. And so that was the highlight of my week.
Awesome. I love that too. And that, so important in life. And we're going to touch on that as we go through your latest book as well. So let's just start with, tell us, for our listeners and our viewers who may not have come across you before, tell us a little bit about your journey so far, and then we'll talk about the book after that.
Yeah, so I I started my first company when I was about 16. I was getting into trouble in school for trying to be an entrepreneur, and I've started 6 companies over my career, and I now have a small coaching firm where we do strategic planning. There's 3 of us across Australia. We typically work with mid-market companies. I got to a point probably about 15 years ago where I thought, what do I love doing the most? And I'd come to the conclusion it was spending time with leadership teams. And that's the path I've pursued for the last 15 years, working in that domain. I have 4 kids. And a bit like yourself, a little farm out in the country. So one of my great joys is driving a tractor, believe it or not.
My husband would love that. We won't tell him.
No.
Oh, love that. So, Brad, let's talk about your latest book, and I've got a copy here. Bigger isn't better. Better is better. So tell us, why is this important? And a little bit about why you wrote it.
I think that books are important, and it's a signature of your life's work. And I think I have no time for books that are written as a business card that copy other people's work. Now, you may be inspired by other people's work, there's no doubt, but there's a lot of books, especially today when it's so easy compared to many years ago, where there's no original thought, there's no depth of thinking, and I really, it's never been my intent to do that. So each of the books, the 4 books that I've written, have really been about what is a problem that I see that frustrates me, perhaps, that I can't find a book to point leaders to go and read. So the first book was about the 5 roles of a CEO, essentially. So we know what a nurse does or a painter, but we don't know what a CEO job role is. And so I wrote that for that reason. The second was onboarding, and that was about how do we get people to be successful in their role. We can hire the right people, but then onboarding is the most underutilized part of the process. So I saw that was very frustrating for me, and I couldn't find a book. And then the third book was equally about onboarding for managers. Now, this is the fourth book, and it really talks about why do people start a business to be free, whatever that freedom means in their definition, only to end up feeling like they're trapped and oftentimes losing everything, and certainly not living the kind of life that they want. So why does that happen? And so I saw time and time and time again, people were going and setting these goals that were, if not unachievable, they were setting themselves up for misery. and they spent all of their life or life energy doing that, and it was only when they got to later in life when they realized, what have I done? I've been climbing this ladder of success and it's been against the wrong wall.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't grow a business or build a larger business, but it does mean that you've got to be really intentional. So it's very much, there's a lot of books that talk about the tools, but this book is very much about the mindset and the way that you should think.
Yep. Love it. Beautiful. So then tell us about your new blueprint for success and how it can help these business owners that are, as you said, stuck in their misery, etc.
Yeah. Well, it's a book about mindset. So let's begin with the end in mind. So the last chapter of the book is called A Better Life by Design. So how can you build a better life by design? Now, that chapter is split into 5 sections: healthy, wealthy, wise, happy, and great family. And they're the 5 components that I kind of build on there. But you can't build yourself a great life by design unless, if you're an entrepreneur or you work in an owner-led company, unless you have a company that isn't draining your energy all day, every day. Now, it's curious to consider at this point in the conversation, is this a book about my business or about me? And my contention is, well, there is no 2 versions of you. There is only one, and the person who shows up at home is the same person that shows up at work. And if you're having a bad time at home, you're having a bad time at work, and vice versa. So very much it was intentional to say the end of the book is about building a better life by design. And then how do you get there? Well, you've got to have a better team.
Yeah.
You've got to have a better customers, a better offering, and then better financials. And then when you get those 4 areas of your business compounding, you can build the kind of business that you actually want to own. And one of the big jobs that we find ourselves having to do is to get owners to fall back in love with their business. How many times I've had people say to me, I want to quit. And it's like, well, you're the shareholder and managing director. This is going to be a little bit hard. I find it difficult to count. But people can be drained when they don't have a good team or good customers or a good offering, or their financials aren't working. So we've got to get that part of the business and the mindset again working. And I intentionally use the word compounding so that we can give ourselves the freedom to build a life by design.
I just love that. Awesome. And I loved your comment about having soul in business. So, my husband and I have run businesses together for 27 years, and like, I know why I love our business. I get to work with my kids. It's like, for me, every day is the best day because I get to learn as well, which is what I love. And so I love this concept where you talked about, the importance of having soul in business. So do you want to tell our listeners and our viewers a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's a windy road to get there, right? So bear with me for a moment. So this book is written for owner-led companies, and it's about their mindset. Now, an owner-led company is not a corporation, but the problem is that many of the books that we read are written by people who are selling to corporations. Okay. And so what works in a corporation might not work in an owner-led company. Even if you're 10 million, 50 million, $100 million, the bulk of the money in the industry is in speaking engagements to corporations in America. And so a lot of the blowback that we get in owner-led companies, or the information that we get, is from that circuit. So if it worked in this corporation, well, then maybe we should try it in our owner-led company with 20 or 50 employees, and then it doesn't work, or it doesn't have the same impact. And so we've got to firstly understand that a corporation is not an owner-led company, and a corporation is, in fact, a system without a leader, right? Now we think, well, what about the CEO or the board? Well, the board operates at the pleasure of the shareholders who want to return in a corporation, and the CEO operates at the pleasure of the board, and they can all be fired in this chain of command, and then the other people. But it's different in an owner-led company, because in an owner-led company, there is no one to fire you. You have to, and that's why you do it, right? Because you want the freedom. There's no one to fire you. And because there's no one to fire you, like a board or shareholders, when you are running an owner-led company, you have that freedom to do anything. And that's great. And we love it, but you can't do everything.
Yeah.
And because you can't do everything, we can find ourselves in this trap of trying to do everything without knowing for it. And it creates a lack of patience and a lack of discipline, which leads to what I call impulsive risk takers. That is the signature of an entrepreneur who's chasing the shiny things. Now, with all of that, then what I'm trying to do through better teams, better customers, better offerings, and better financials is say, if this is true and you agree with that thesis that a corporation is different to an owner-led company, then we can go backwards and say, okay, so what is the potential strategic advantage that we can gain in our competition against a corporation in a market? Now, one of those competitions in the context of a better team is the competition for talent, or the war for talent. Now, we can think that corporation is huge and they have a big budget, they're going to get all the best people. But then there's another line of thought, which is, well, in a corporation, you're just a number. And you're treated like just a number. And a lot of people leave corporations because they don't like being treated as just a number. And herein lies the opportunity for owner-led companies to think about, well, if that is the case, then what does an owner-led company do? And what is the opportunity? It is to build a company with soul, where we can care for people in the totality of their lives in an authentic manner. Like, you can build the kind of, from a better team perspective, you can build the kind of team and business that, first of all, you would love to work at, because we've got to get you to fall in love with your business again. And secondly, because we can have the right kind of people who want to work in a place that has soul, that actually has that authentic soul, because a corporation cannot have a soul.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So I'm curious then about the better customers too, because that, I know, customers change over time as your, business changes and stuff like that. Tell us about that side of things as well.
Yeah. And it draws upon soul. So if you're surrounded by a team who have soul, who do they want to work for?
Yeah.
Now, sometimes you've got to work for corporations, I get that, but corporations are built to transact. Corporations are designed around quarterly reports, and it's very hard to get long-term strategy to work effectively, or to implement it in. It's not impossible, but in a corporation, because everything comes back to this quarter's results and reports, and the people are treated as just numbers, and the corporation is a system. So if that is, again, true, well, what is the kind of relationship that we can build with our customers, and what will be the impact of that? So if you, again, try to emulate a corporation and what works in a corporation that is designed to transact with customers, it's very different to a owner-led company where we're endeavoring to build soul with a corporation, irrespective of the customers, because what we're then able to do is to say, let's focus, rather than on the transactional relationship of let's do this particular transaction, let's focus on the long-term value of a customer, and let's focus on the customer acquisition cost. So long-term value of a customer, rather than having the example I provide in the book, rather than having a customer stay for, say, 2 years and spend $6,000, what if we got them to stay for 4 years and spend $15,000. So we think about how do we add more value and have more soulful and deep relationships with customers where we can meet their needs so that we're able to complement that soulful organization that we're building.
Nice. And I love that it's got that longer term outlook. So I work with a lot of family businesses, and one of the reasons I love family business is where they work generationally, they often will think that longer term. So I love that fact that, the soul, the longer term, how do we create that longer term value as well?
Yeah, I follow not anything to do with them. I follow an organization in the US called the Tugboat Institute, and they are very much into family businesses, and they've got a saying which is, it's quite possible that the only strategic advantage of a family business is that they can think long term,
Yeah.
and I absolutely support that. I think that if that is it, then lean into that.
Yep. Yep. And I'd not heard of the Tugboat Institute till I read your book. And then I was like, oh, I'll have to look them up. And now you've just reminded me. So straight after this, that's what I'm going to do.
They're fantastic.
So, Brad, we're going to divert a little bit now and talk about, because when we have authors on, we love to understand the different writing processes that different authors have. So would you mind sharing a little bit about yours, particularly given now this is your fourth book and you're doing one, it sounds, about every 2 years?
Yeah. So on my third book, Onboarded for Managers, had a very specific role to play, and that was that if you implement, so Onboarded was a business case, and I did a research study with 1,000 CEOs and hiring managers to be able to build a body of data that substantiated why we should invest in this, the most neglected of all processes, and what is the output, and then validating that in my own data set as well as against other data within the industry to provide a simple manual for business leaders and owners to say, okay, this is why we've got to focus on onboarding, and we can see the results that come of that. Now, managers in a business and supervisors are probably not that interested. So in that side of things, so Onboarded for Managers was written in a narrative style as a story to follow the journey and the narrative arc. So I'll exclude that one from that because that had a specific purpose. But the other ones, the best way I can describe it is if I imagine the forming of a galaxy and a solar system.
Mhm.
It starts off as all of these specks of dust that are everywhere, and then after a while, a few specks of dust kind of start to gather together in different spots, and then some more specks of dust, then suddenly they become into rocks and then boulders, and then they become asteroids, and then they become planets, and then solar systems. That's the best way I can kind of
Yep.
use metaphorically to describe that. But it begins, I suppose it's evolved somewhat over time. With Made to Thrive, I tried to reverse engineer the role of a CEO to say what is the results that endure over time, and then how do we get those? And so that I walk people through that in the book. But with this other books, very much how I've evolved now is to be, and I got this from, I didn't get it, but I learned a little bit more about it from Ryan, who wrote Ego is the Enemy. I forget his second name.
Yep.
Whereby he has a topic and then he keeps putting ideas into that topic because he knows the topic will be relevant to the book. So he keeps gathering information about that topic. So then what you get is maybe 5 or 50 topics that have got all kind of bits of supporting information that either validate or he can draw upon within the book.
I love that. And I love that structure. That's how I tend to do mine as well. So we're coming towards the end of this, but is there anything that we should be sharing with our listeners and viewers that we haven't really touched on yet?
Well, I think in terms of the book, it makes me deeply emotional and sad to think that entrepreneurship doesn't do what's on the tin, and that was part of the motivation.
Yeah, right.
And what I mean by it doesn't do what it says on the tin, it promises freedom, but it doesn't deliver freedom for most. And I say genuinely, most people, I think what it delivers is stress and risk, and they don't really understand why. And they want to try to find a way out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that as a society, we've got enough business knowledge now to be able to say it doesn't need to be that way, but you've got to invest in learning as an entrepreneur to understand what's the most important thing that I've got to read next and learn next so that I can get what's promised on the tin.
Yeah, nice, nice. So obviously, what they need to read next is bigger isn't better, better is better. And because, as an entrepreneur, I read through this and I was like, that's a great point. That's a great point. So I love that you've created something that, hopefully gets people to come back to that purpose and thinking that longer term and using those beautiful areas that you talked about, so that they can build, better teams, have better customers. What was the next one? It's blanked out of my brain. I wrote it down. Offering, and then the last one, better finances as well. There's such key elements to help keep people on track. And I loved at the start where you did the different quadrants for the risk and stuff like that as well, and just showing where people can sit and where we need to be if we want this to be something that's a long-term endeavor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's human nature. It's not industry specific is my reaction to that.
Yeah. Yep. And so, Brad, I reckon there's going to be some viewers and some listeners, and again, I'm going to hold the book up for those on the video, that would love to reach out to you. So where can they find you in terms of things like website, social media, etc.?
Yeah, so the best way to reach out is my website, evolutionpartners.com.au. I'm probably most known for a weekly newsletter. I've been doing a weekly newsletter since 2014, every week, and it's when people talk to me about or they thank me, it's about the what they're getting from the newsletter. So the newsletter certainly, and there's a subscribe thing in there. Also on LinkedIn, and I've got a podcast which is called The Evolution Partners, where I just try to find interesting people to talk to.
I love that. Awesome. Well, we'll make sure that all of those links are included with the podcast as well. Brad, can I say thank you so much for joining us today? And for those that are watching, Bigger Isn't Better, Better is Better is Brad's latest book. And we encourage you to read it, particularly if you are either an entrepreneur or thinking of becoming an entrepreneur. Great resource to get your mind in that right frame. So thank you so much, Brad. And to all of our listeners and our viewers, have a magical week.